In our headlines on this Thursday afternoon, February 22nd, here in South Korea. Close to 14 centimeters of snow fell overnight in Seoul, disrupting morning commute. While in Gangwon-do province, heavy snow alerts remain in place through tomorrow, that is Friday. Meanwhile, the Bank of Korea announces intentions to maintain its benchmark interest rate at 3.5% for the ninth session in a row, while sharing caution about a rate cut in the near future. Also on the local front, doctors in training are staying away from their hospitals for a third day as government authorities appeal to their sense of responsibility on both moral and legal grounds. Capital Seoul woke up to a heavy blanket of snow, and the morning commute, even on train tracks, was reduced to a snail's pace. Our Yoon starts us off.
According to the Korea Meteorological Administration, 13.8 centimeters of snow accumulated in Seoul on Wednesday night. The 8.6 centimeters of snow that fell after midnight was by itself the third highest amount of snow to fall in a single day in February since 2000. Other parts of the metropolitan area also received heavy snowfall, with 9.8 centimeters falling in Incheon and 5.8 centimeters in Suwon. According to officials at Seoul Metro, the overnight snowfall caused delays on Seoul subway lines 2, 5, and 7. Ice formed on railway tracks at a train depot at the eastern end of line number 5 in the Godok-dong neighborhood, which kept trains from leaving the depot on time, leading to delays of about 25 minutes. On lines 2 and 7, signal problems also led to delays of up to 25 minutes. Seoul Metro said it is still working towards fully restoring the tracks and power supply. The precipitation has died down in most places, but Gangwon-do province is expected to see more snowfall on top of the 70 centimeters accumulated since Tuesday. This region is expected to see up to 15 centimeters of snowfall through Friday as heavy snow alerts remain in place. Yoon, Arirang News.
Also here in Seoul, the standoff between doctors in training and relevant government officials remains intense, with patients praying for a quick resolution. Our Yoon has the latest.
The nationwide doctors' strike continued for a third day on Thursday, with doctors protesting against the expansion of South Korea's medical school quota by 2,000 to over 5,000 starting in 2025. Over 9,000 trainee doctors, more than 74% of the country's interns and residents, had submitted letters of resignation as of 10 p.m. Wednesday, though none have been accepted. Out of these, over 8,000 have not shown up for work. The total number of leave of absence letters from medical students announced on Thursday surpassed 11,000 nationwide, which is more than 60% of the total number of medical students. About two-thirds of trainee doctors have walked out of hospitals, meaning medical services have been disrupted and patients are being affected. For example, at Samsung Medical Center, one of Seoul's 5 major teaching hospitals, 30% of operations scheduled for Wednesday were postponed. Surgical procedures at the Severance Hospital were less than half of the usual amount. The focus of large hospitals has shifted to prioritize critical and emergency care, causing outpatient appointments to be postponed, while some patients recovering from surgery were discharged earlier than scheduled. The number of complaints reported increased to almost 150, with 44 of those over surgery cancellations.
My father had emergency surgery for colon cancer, so today I came to check on the results, but I received a text message asking for my understanding, saying that appointments might be delayed due to the high number of patients.
The government has also issued return-to-work orders to the majority of the doctors who have walked out and are asking to discuss the issue with them. In a briefing on Thursday, the government stood firm on its plan to take strong measures, including license suspensions and legal action against those who do not return to work immediately.
The government has decided that at least 2,000 more doctors are needed as soon as possible, taking into account factors like the training period, growing medical demand due to the aging population, and other opinions from different parts of society.
The official added that by the year 2035, around 32,000 doctors aged 70 or older will retire, which based on the current capacity exceeds the number of new graduates over the next 10 years. To this, junior doctors are demanding the government backtracks on the plan to increase the number of medical students, while the Korean Medical Association calls its return-to-work orders amount to suppression. Yoon, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, Seoul Central Bank has decided to hold its benchmark interest rate steady at 3.5% for the 9th session in a row. Our correspondent Moon tells us why.
South Korea's central bank kept its benchmark interest rate steady at 3.5% as widely expected. The decision was announced on Thursday following a monetary policy committee meeting.
Due to supply chain risks posed on global oil prices and continued high consumer costs, slowing inflation will not be easy. We believe that it is necessary to stabilize the inflation rate to the 2% level by maintaining monetary tightening for a sufficient period of time.
This is the 9th consecutive meeting that the BOK has decided to freeze the rate since it was raised to 3.5% in January last year, following 10 consecutive rate hikes in a bid to tackle inflation. Analysts say that there is little reason to rush the lowering of interest rates due to higher than targeted price hikes. In January, on-year growth in consumer prices fell to the 2% range for the first time in 6 months, but at 2.8% it remains above the 2% target. The bank said earlier this month that this figure could tick back up, citing geopolitical uncertainties in the Middle East which could influence oil prices. Unfavorable weather conditions have also meant that prices for agricultural products such as fresh fruit are continuing to climb. The continued rise in household debt is also a factor cited by experts as being behind the rate freeze. According to recent data, household debt in the final quarter of 2023 increased to its highest level ever, rising by nearly $6 billion on quarter. In January this year, mortgage loans surged by over $3.6 billion compared to the previous month, which is the second largest increase seen since January 2021. It is also unlikely that the BOK will cut interest rates ahead of the United States, with the current key interest rate gap between the two countries at its largest ever at 2 percentage points. Local experts believe that the central bank could ease their monetary policy in the second half of next year, provided the Federal Reserve's pivot policy takes effect in June as currently predicted. Meanwhile, the BOK also maintained its economic growth outlook for this year at 2.1%, as well as the inflation forecast at 2.6% as set last November. Moon Arirang News.
And in the U.S., financial analytics company S&P Global believes the Federal Reserve will start rate cuts this summer. The firm on Wednesday forecast an initial rate cut of 25 basis points in June, followed by 2 additional cuts to a total 75 basis points by the year's end. It added that inflation will slow in the months ahead. As for the U.S.'s real GDP growth this year, the outlook was raised to 2.4% from an earlier projection of 1.5% back in November. Former cryptocurrency entrepreneur Kwon is reportedly likely to face a U.S. court on fraud charges, despite efforts to have him extradited to South Korea. Our Lee reports.
22 months since first going on the run and 11 months on from his arrest, a Montenegro court ruled that crypto entrepreneur and Terraform's Live co-founder Do Kwon should be extradited to the United States. According to a report by the Wall Street Journal on Wednesday, the Puerto Rico High Court ruled that Kwon is to be extradited to the U.S., where he has been indicted on charges of crimes committed in the field of financial operations. In 2023, Kwon and Terraform were charged by the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission over a multi-billion-dollar fraud. The report added that the court rejected South Korea's request for extradition. Kwon's lawyer argued that his client should be extradited to his home country rather than the U.S. However, the court ruled otherwise. The basis for the decision by the court was not revealed. Kwon was arrested at an airport in Montenegro last March after being caught with fake passports. The charges laid against Kwon and Terraform Labs stem from the collapse of the Terra USD, a stablecoin designed to maintain a constant $1 price, and the Luna token, which was closely linked to Terra USD. Both cryptocurrencies lost an estimated $40 billion or more in May 2022 when Terra USD failed to maintain its $1 peg. The SEC said Kwon and his company deceived investors about the stability of Terra USD and that a popular Korean mobile payment app used the Terraform blockchain to settle transactions. Lee, Arirang News.
President Yoon Suk-yeol has pledged to generate $2.5 billion worth of nuclear power projects and to provide extra financing worth $750 million. The pledge was shared earlier on this Thursday during the 14th session of the government's policy briefing open to the public, this time on plans to advance Korea's nuclear power industry. Also, during his term in office, over $3 billion will be earmarked for related R&D, with supporting legal guidelines in place. And President Yoon Suk-yeol has raised prospects of removing Greenbelt designation for some regions outside the Greater Seoul area to allow for tangible economic progress. Our top office correspondent Kim Do-yeon covers these prospects.
In Ulsan, the first city that was designated for industrial development, President Yoon Suk-yeol shared his plans to utilize more land for new industries to grow. This came on Wednesday as he hosted a livelihood discussion there, a city that led the nation's growth in shipbuilding, automobile, and petrochemical industries.
기존의 패스트 팔로워에서 이제 퍼스트 무버로 탈바꿈을 새롭게 해야 합니다. 정부는 첨단 산업과 미래 산업을 새로운 성장 엔진으로 삼아 울산과 대한민국이 다시 도약할 기회를 만들 것입니다. 이를 위해 제일 중요한 것이 바로 새로운 산업을 전개할 수 있는 입지 공간을 마련하는 것입니다.
He spoke about lifting greenbelt and agricultural land restrictions to efficiently combine labor, capital, and technology to maximize economic values. Specifically, he said he believes in local government autonomy in terms of lifting restrictions in order to foster competitive industries. To achieve this, he's looking into adjusting the rules when it comes to lifting restrictions, which are the same throughout the country, to be different depending on each region and type of area, as he called such rule a, quote, obstacle. These rules haven't been changed in 20 years. He also added that smart and vertical farming are new industries with a lot of potential, so he will adjust regulations of the agricultural land restrictions for the industry's use of more land. All these reforms and the restrictions of land use, he says, are important to achieving his goal of regional balanced growth.
12개 부처와 지자체의 농지 이용 규제의 종류가 무려 336가지에 달하고 있습니다. 전수조사해서 시대의 변화를 따라가지 못하는 낡은 규제는 신속히 개혁하겠습니다.
At the Wednesday's discussion were 60 citizens, including leaders of big companies in Ulsan and a student from the city's vocational education Meister High School, to share their views on each of the topics. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
In other news, as part of efforts to raise greater awareness of their plight and to embrace their inclusion into a new society, the Yoon administration has decided to designate a day, that is July 14th, for North Korean defectors. Our North Korean affairs correspondent Kim Jong-sil has details.
A much-awaited day for North Korean defectors has been unveiled here in the south. On Wednesday, Seoul's Unification Ministry announced that July 14th will be a day dedicated to honor them.
North Korean Defectors Day will be very symbolic for the 34,000 North Korean defectors who have faced unspeakable adversity in the process of defecting and are now living soundly.
The ministry plans to hold the first ceremony in July as soon as the relevant laws are in place. This is the first time that a celebratory day has been dedicated to defectors from the north, although the South Korean government has offered various support programs since legislation on North Korean defectors was adopted back in 1997. The government support extends from helping them find a home, a job, giving initial settlement money, and offering special college admission, among others.
But there have been continuous calls requesting the dedication of a day to honor North Korean defectors as they sometimes face discrimination in South Korea as someone coming from the north. The South Korean Unification Ministry hopes the day will give more courage and hope to the defectors in their future endeavors here.
With Pyongyang's recent comments on South and North Korea being, quote, two separate countries abandoning the idea of reunification, it is the South Korean government's stance to welcome defectors from the North and continue with the aim of reunification that guarantees peace and freedom. Kim Jung-sil, Arirang News.
And for the first time since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the European Union is slapping sanctions on North Korea for its role in advancing the Kremlin's aggression against Kyiv. Our An Sung-jin reports.
The European Union is to impose its first sanctions on North Korea in relation to the Ukraine-Russia war. The Belgian government, which currently holds the rotating EU presidency, announced on X, formerly Twitter, that the 27 EU members approved a 13th package of Ukraine-related sanctions against Russia on Wednesday. It added that it will be one of the most extensive sanctions packages approved by the EU. France 24 stated that the North Korean defense minister and a North Korean firm are reportedly to be added to the sanctions list for supporting the Russian military. Those on the list will be banned from traveling to the EU or doing business there. The EU has previously imposed sanctions on high-ranking North Korean officials for human rights violations and violations of UN Security Council resolutions, but this will be the first time regarding the war in Ukraine. North Korea has reportedly supplied munitions to Russia against Ukraine in return for satellite technology.
At least 24 ballistic missiles of allegedly North Korean origin were used during Russia's missile attacks on the territory of Ukraine.
The new listings will add 193 entities and individuals, mostly for helping Moscow procure weapons or for their involvement in kidnapping Ukrainian children. More details will be released after the package is officially approved on February 24th, which is the second anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Including the most recent sanctions, the EU's sanction list over Russian aggression in Ukraine will have more than 2,000 individuals and entities. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
This week, Ukraine marks a grim milestone of 2 years under Russian aggression. And in light of this reality, my colleague Peunji reached out to the resident head of the UN in Ukraine for her thoughts on the painful plight of people there and for her calls on continued global solidarity. Do take a listen.
This is what an apartment block in Kharkiv looked like after being hit by Russian missile strikes late last month. Since February 2022, thousands have been killed and millions have not been able to return to their homes. As of last month, nearly 3.7 million people remain displaced in Ukraine. And according to the UN Refugee Agency, almost 6.3 million people have crossed into neighboring countries. Denise Brown, the head of the United Nations in Ukraine, currently living in Kyiv, says the air raid sirens still go off a couple of times a day, but people seem to have grown used to them.
I think it's terrible what people can get used to. And Ukrainians, very calm, very, very calm. There's absolutely no panic that I see. My team is not panicked, but it's the stress of what is coming.
She says they've been delivering supplies to regions along the front lines 2 to 3 times a week, as those directly impacted by the war are in need of shelter, health services, bunkers for schools, and psychosocial support. She added nothing has improved, and although everyone is exhausted after 2 years, the Ukrainian people remain strong.
People are tired. It's very true that they are tired, but I don't see any faltering in their determination to stay in their homes and to continue. It's true that the people of Ukraine are very strong. People often say resilient, but it takes a toll. But I think not on the determination.
As the war enters its 3rd year and with the conflict between Israel and Gaza, there are concerns that the focus is slowly shifting away from Ukraine. And she says the most important thing that's needed from the international community is to not forget about the war-torn country.
So it's really important that governments, the member states of the United Nations, speak out about all these contexts and don't forget them, and don't forget Ukraine.
Peunji, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at the latest news in the world now. In the United Kingdom, the country's nuclear deterrent, a Trident missile launched from a submarine, reportedly misfired during a test last month. The Sun newspaper reported on Wednesday that the failed missile crashed into the ocean close to the launch site off the coast of Florida. This is the second time in a row that a test firing of a Trident missile from a Royal Navy submarine has failed. Defense Secretary Grant Shapps, who oversaw HMS Vanguard's launch test, said that on this occasion an anomaly did occur, but there are no implications for the reliability of the wider Trident missile systems and stockpiles. The previous test in 2016 also failed, with the missile veering off course. British tests of Trident missiles are rare, partially due to the cost, as each missile comes with a price tag of around $20 million. A retired satellite burned up in the Earth's atmosphere over the North Pacific Ocean on Wednesday. According to the European Space Agency, its European remote sensing satellite, the ERS-2, completed its atmospheric re-entry at approximately 6:17 p.m. Central European Time. The ESA also said there were no reports of damage to property due to falling debris. The satellite, which has been out of use since 2011, had been gradually declining in altitude until it reached a critical altitude of around 80 kilometers when strong atmospheric drag began breaking it into pieces. Launched in 1995, the 2-ton satellite collected data on land surfaces, ice, sea levels, and warming oceans, as well as monitoring natural disasters. In the U.S., Alabama Supreme Court ruled on Friday that frozen embryos created during in vitro fertilization can be considered children under state law and are entitled to the same legal rights as any other unborn children. Justice J. Mitchell, who oversaw the majority 7-2 ruling, wrote that unborn children are children without exception based on developmental stage, physical location, or any other ancillary characteristics. This means that frozen embryos are now legally considered extrauterine children. The first of its kind decision comes in response to wrongful death lawsuits in 2021, launched against a fertility clinic in the state after a patient broke into an IVF freezer and dropped a number of trays with frozen embryos. American superstar Beyoncé has become the first black woman to top the Billboard's Hot Country charts. The 42-year-old singer-songwriter reached #1 on the US chart on Tuesday with 2 songs from her upcoming album. The song Texas Hold'em took the top spot, while 16 Carriages came in at #9. Texas Hold'em also reached #2 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart. While this is not the first time the Texas native pop star has released country tracks, the songs are the best performing in the genre so far. Kim Seong, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. Hope your morning ride was safe and sound. Seoul received nearly 14 centimeters of snow overnight, causing a messy Thursday morning commute. Precipitation has died down in most places and should let up today, but those in Gangwon-do province need to brace for more snowfall through Friday with up to 30 centimeters in the forecast. The rest of Gangwon-do could see 2 to 15 centimeters with heavy snow alerts remaining in place. Meanwhile, certain parts of the country will receive on and off rain instead of snow through tomorrow under cloudy skies. We had sub-zero temperatures to start the day in the capital, but rising to 4 degrees by the afternoon. Busan will see a high of 7 degrees. And especially those traveling from south to the northern regions today, be prepared for messy roads and stay safe. Meanwhile, Jeju Island will see on and off rain through Sunday. Then Jeollanam-do is forecast to see a wintry mix this weekend with more up and down temperatures in most parts of Korea. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
And those are the headlines at this hour here in Korea. Coming up right after this break is our daily panel session. So do stay with us and thank you for now.